I stood in the parking lot, thumb hovering over the play button, expecting a sweet reminder to eat dinner. Instead, the speakers blasted my fiancé's sneer and the sharp voice of the woman he calls his sister. He talked about me not as a bride, but as an asset to be transferred. I did not cry. I just understood. This upcoming marriage was not a union. It was an orchestrated robbery. My name is Leah Bailey, and at 31 years old, I considered myself a woman who had finally stepped out of the shadows and into the sun. I was sitting in the driver's seat of my sedan, parked in the fourth row of a grocery store lot in Cleveland. The air conditioning was humming against the humid Ohio afternoon, and my biggest concern at that precise moment was whether I should buy the organic kale Grant liked or the regular kind he pretended to tolerate. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a voice memo from Grant Hollowell, my fiancé. Grant was 34, a man who wore success like a second skin. We were 3 months away from the wedding. I smiled as I unlocked the screen. Grant usually sent voice notes when he was driving between client meetings at Summit and Rowe Advisory, leaving me little snippets of affection to get me through my paperwork at Larkfield. I expected to hear his polished baritone telling me he was running late or reminding me to hydrate. I tapped the play button, already shifting the car into reverse, ready to listen while I backed out. But the voice that filled the quiet cabin was not the warm, solicitous tone he used with me. It was sharp, impatient, and echoing slightly, as if he were pacing in a hallway. "Marissa, you need to calm down," Grant's voice said. He sounded annoyed, the way a manager speaks to a subordinate who isn't grasping the big picture. "I told you, the timeline is locked. Stop worrying about the prenup. The prenup is a distraction. The real work happens after the ceremony." My foot slammed onto the brake. The car jerked to a halt, though I hadn't moved more than an inch. I stared at the screen. The contact name said Grant, but the audio file was clearly not meant for me. He was talking to his sister. I should have stopped listening. That is what a good person does. They respect privacy, but my thumb hovered over the pause button and refused to descend. "She is not going to read it. Riss," Grant continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming conspiratorial. "Leah is pliable. She is so desperate to be part of a real family that she will sign whatever I put in front of her as long as I tell her it is for our future. I have the documents drafted for the second day after we get back from the honeymoon. We frame it as a joint asset protection adjustment. It sounds boring. She hates boring. She will just look for the line with the X and sign her name." The air in the car suddenly felt thin, as if the oxygen had been sucked out through the vents. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, wet thumping that echoed in my ears. Pliable. The word hung in the air, ugly and clinical. Then came the sound that made my blood run cold. It was a laugh, not Grant's, but a woman's laugh coming from the other end of his line. He must have been recording a call on speaker, or she was in the room with him. It was Marissa. It was a sharp, jagged sound, devoid of warmth. "Just make sure it is tight, Grant." Marissa's voice bled into the recording, tinny but distinct. "I do not want her claiming ownership of the portfolio later. She comes from nowhere. She has zero leverage." "She has nothing," Grant replied, and the sneer in his voice was so vivid I could almost see the curl of his lip. "That is the beauty of it. Who is she going to run to? She has no one backing her. She is a rescue dog. Marissa, you feed a rescue dog once, and it never bites the hand holding the bowl. Besides," he paused. In that second of silence, I prayed for the recording to end. I prayed for the battery to die. I prayed for the world to end. But it didn't. "Look at her," Grant said, his tone shifting to a casual cruelty that hit me harder than a physical blow. "She is fine. She is serviceable. But let's be honest. A woman like that knows she is punching above her weight class with me. She knows I am the prize. She will sign away her rights just to keep the ring on her finger. I am not marrying a partner. I am acquiring a signature." The audio clip ended. The silence that rushed back into the car was deafening. I sat there, completely frozen. A numbness started in my fingertips and spread up my arms. A physical manifestation of shock. I felt like I was floating outside of my body, looking down at the woman in the driver's seat. Serviceable, rescue dog, acquiring a signature. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone against the dashboard. I did not burst into tears. Instead, I felt a strange, high-pitched ringing in my ears, like the aftermath of an explosion. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel, and I looked down to see my knuckles were white. Without realizing it, I had dug my fingernails into the fleshy part of my palm so hard that when I finally unclenched my hand, 4 crescent-shaped indents were waiting there, angry and red, on the verge of drawing blood. The sharp pain was the only thing that convinced me I was still awake. This was not just a man venting to his sister about getting cold feet. This was not normal wedding stress. This was a blueprint. My mind, usually so organized and methodical with compliance data at work, began to race, connecting dots I had previously ignored. The way Marissa constantly asked about my family history but never seemed to listen to the answers. The way Grant had been so insistent on handling all the vendor contracts because you shouldn't worry your pretty head about the boring stuff. The rush to get married before the fiscal quarter ended. They were not planning a wedding. They were planning a heist. And I was the vault they intended to crack open. I looked at the timestamp on the memo. Sent 2 minutes ago. He must have meant to forward a recording of a previous conversation to Marissa. Or perhaps he was recording a voice note for her and tapped my name by mistake in his haste. Before I could even process what to do, a notification banner slid down from the top of my screen. A text message from Grant, heading into a busy meeting. Babe, won't be able to talk for 2 hours. Love you. The juxtaposition made bile rise in my throat. Love you. 2 words that had been my anchor for 18 months were now revealed to be nothing more than anesthetic. He was keeping the patient sedated while he sharpened the scalpel. I stared at the text. It was so easy for him. The lie came as naturally as breathing. He was terrified I had heard the memo, so he was covering his tracks, creating a buffer of time where he didn't have to face me, just in case, or perhaps he hadn't realized his mistake yet. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide and dark. I looked like the pliable woman he described. I looked like the victim he needed me to be. But deep inside the numbness, a spark ignited. It wasn't anger. Anger is hot and messy and makes you make mistakes. This was something colder. It was the survival instinct of the rescue dog he had mocked. He had forgotten that street dogs survive because they hear things house pets do not. He had forgotten that when you have no one backing you, you learn to back yourself. I took a slow, trembling breath, holding it in my lungs until they burned, then exhaled. I picked up the phone. I did not reply. I did not call him to demand an explanation. If I confronted him now, he would spin it. He would gaslight me. He would say I misunderstood, or that it was a joke, or worse, he would accelerate his timeline and find another way to hurt me. No, I needed to know exactly what the assets were. I needed to know why Marissa was involved. I needed to know the full extent of the trap before I could dismantle it. I looked into my own eyes in the glass of the mirror, watching the pupils contract. Okay, I whispered to the empty car. My voice sounded foreign, rough and scrapped raw. Okay, I will play the fool until you collapse. The drive from the grocery store to the apartment I shared with Grant took 20 minutes, but it felt like I was crossing a time zone. I drove through the gray industrial streets of Cleveland, watching the city shift from the worn-down brick of the manufacturing district to the gleaming glass of the revitalized downtown. This was my city. It was practical, sturdy, and unpretentious. I worked in one of those brick buildings for Larkfield Compliance Group. My job was not sexy. I spent my days cross-referencing safety regulations and ensuring that mid-sized logistics companies did not get fined by the state. I made $55,000 a year. I paid my student loans on time. I bought clothes off the rack at department stores, and I saved 6% of my paycheck in a retirement fund that grew at a glacial pace. I was, by every definition, a normal woman living a normal life. Grant, on the other hand, lived in a world of curated perception. When I unlocked the door to our loft, the scent of expensive sandalwood diffuser oil hit me. Everything in our apartment was chosen for how it would look in an Instagram story. The leather couch was uncomfortable but Italian. The kitchen island was marble, which stained if you looked at it wrong. But Grant insisted on it because it signaled taste. Grant worked for Summit and Rowe Advisory. He was a wealth management consultant, which mostly meant he wore $3,000 suits to tell people with old money how to keep it. He was obsessed with optics. He didn't just drink coffee. He drank single-origin pours from a specific roaster. He didn't just go to the gym. He went to an exclusive fitness club where the membership fee cost more than my car insurance. I used to think his attention to detail was romantic. I thought he wanted the best for us. Now, standing in the entryway with a bag of groceries cutting off the circulation in my fingers, I realized it was all set dressing, and I was just another prop. I unpacked the groceries mechanically. As I placed the kale in the crisper drawer, my mind drifted to Marissa. Grant's sister was a striking woman, always dressed in sharp blazers and stilettos that clicked loudly on any floor. She wasn't just his sister, she was his mirror. They shared the same hungry look in their eyes, the same desperate need to be the most important person in the room. I thought about the last time we had brunch. It was 2 weeks ago at a bistro in Ohio City. Marissa had smiled at me over her mimosa, her eyes scanning my face with a terrifying intensity. "Leah," she had said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "Grant tells me your father passed away when you were quite young. That must have been so hard with the estate. Did your mother ever remarry, or did she keep the family assets in a trust?" At the time, I thought she was being solicitous. I thought she was trying to bond. I had given her a vague answer about my mother being private. Now, the memory tasted like ash. She hadn't been making conversation. She had been mining for data. She was assessing my liquidity. She was checking to see if there were any legal hurdles, like a trustee or a family lawyer, that might get in the way of whatever plans she and Grant were cooking up. I closed the refrigerator door and leaned my forehead against the cool stainless steel. The signs had been there all along. I had just been too blinded by the diamond on my finger to see them. I remembered the papers. Grant was always rushing me to sign things. It was a running theme in our engagement. 3 months ago, it was the deposit for the wedding venue. He had slapped a 30-page contract on the coffee table while I was watching a movie. "Just sign the last page, babe," he had said, uncapping a heavy fountain pen and handing it to me. I already read it. It is just standard liability stuff. If we don't sign by 5 this afternoon, we lose the date. I had signed. Then there was the application for the joint credit card. To build our credit history together, he had argued. It looks better for the mortgage application later. I had signed that, too, and just last week, he had brought up a post-nuptial asset integration form. He tried to frame it as a romantic gesture, claiming it was about oneness and sharing everything. He had kissed my neck while I held the pen, distracting me, telling me how smart I was for handling the domestic side of things so he could focus on his career. He wasn't partnering with me. He was building a cage made of paper, a cage where I would voluntarily walk in and lock the door behind me, thinking I was entering a sanctuary. I walked into the second bedroom, which served as Grant's home office. I needed to see if there was physical proof, something concrete to match the voice on the recording. The room smelled of his cologne. His desk was a chaotic spread of files. Grant was charming, but he was not organized. He relied on assistants for that. I scanned the desk, nothing unusual. Just client portfolios and brochures for luxury watches. I turned to the laser printer on the credenza. The red light was blinking. Paper jam. Grant never fixed jams. He would just print the document again on the office printer downtown and leave the mess for me to deal with. My heart began to beat faster, a heavy rhythm against my ribs. I reached into the paper tray and gently pulled out the crumpled sheet that had caused the error. It was wrinkled and smeared with toner on one side, but the text was legible. It was an email printout. From Marissa Hollowell to Grant Hollowell. Subject: Phase 2 Strategy. I smoothed the paper out on the desk, my hands trembling. The body of the email was a list. It looked like a project management timeline. Item 1. Secure venue deposit. Completed. Item 2. Joint credit line established. Completed. Item 3. Beneficiary updates on life insurance. Pending. Push this after the wedding night. Item 4. Transfer of deeds for Project C. Ready for signature. Project C. My eyes fixated on that letter. C. Why C? It wasn't my initial. It wasn't a nickname. And then, the memory of the voice memo clicked into place. Grant's voice echoing in my head. She is a rescue dog. She is serviceable. C stood for candidate, or perhaps commodity, or maybe it was just a cold. Alphabetical assignment in a list of scams they were running. It didn't matter what it stood for. It mattered that it was me. Below the list, there was a paragraph written in Marissa's sharp, legalistic tone. Grant, do not let her read the fine print on the deed transfer. Distract her. Use the building our future script we practiced. If she retains separate counsel, this whole thing falls apart. We need full power of attorney buried in the closing documents. Once we have that, the trust triggers are irrelevant. I felt the blood drain from my face. They weren't just trying to protect his money. They were trying to gain access to something of mine, or perhaps they were planning to use my clean credit and identity to leverage debt for themselves. They were going to hollow me out. I carefully folded the paper and slipped it into the pocket of my jeans. I couldn't leave it there. Grant wouldn't notice it was gone. He thought the machine had just eaten it. I walked back out to the living room and sat on the uncomfortable Italian sofa. The apartment was silent. The city outside was starting to light up. Oblivious to the fact that my life had just been dismantled, I took my phone out of my pocket. I plugged in my headphones. I needed to hear it again. I opened the voice memo app. This time, I didn't listen like a fiancé. I didn't listen like a woman in love. I listened like a compliance officer at Larkfield. I listened like an auditor looking for a discrepancy in the ledger. I pressed play. Leah is pliable. Grant's voice sneered through the earbuds. I closed my eyes. I let the insult wash over me, stripping away the last remnants of affection I held for him. Pliable. We would see about that. You can bend something only so far before it snaps back, and when it snaps, it usually hits the person holding it right in the face. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it Recipes. Then I created a subfolder inside it, buried deep in the directory, named The Wedding. I dragged the audio file into the folder. Then I opened a blank document and began to transcribe every word, typing furiously, my fingers hitting the keys with the precision of a pianist playing a funeral march. The game had changed. He thought he was playing solitaire, moving cards around as he pleased. He didn't realize he was sitting across the table from a player who had just seen his entire hand. I sat at the kitchen island, the marble surface cool against my forearms. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Grant was still at his meeting, which gave me exactly the window I needed. My hands moved with the practiced efficiency of a compliance officer conducting an internal audit. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. Method was my only defense. I forwarded the voice memo to a newly created email address with a password that was a random string of 20 characters. Then I saved the file to a USB drive I used for backing up old photos. Finally, I uploaded it to a cloud storage service under my maiden name. 3 copies, 3 locations. If Grant managed to delete the file from my phone, the ghost of his voice would still exist in the digital ether. Next came the transcript. I typed out every stutter, every pause, every cruel inflection. Seeing the words in black and white made them look less like a conversation and more like a confession. Pliable. Asset. No leverage. I printed 2 copies at the office the next morning, bypassing our home printer entirely. For the next 3 days, I became an actress. When Grant came home that first night, smelling of scotch and expensive steak, I did not recoil. I met him at the door. I let him kiss me. His lips felt like a brand, but I forced my mouth to curve into a smile. "How was the meeting?" I asked, my voice steady. "Brutal," he sighed. loosening his tie. Clients are demanding, but I do it for us. Babe, everything is for us. I know, I said, and I did know, just not in the way he thought. I threw myself into wedding planning with a manic energy that Grant interpreted as excitement. I texted him photos of floral arrangements. I debated the merits of peonies versus garden roses. I asked him if we should upgrade the champagne for the toast. I played the role of the giddy bride so perfectly that I almost sickened myself. Every time he smiled at me, that patronizing, self-satisfied smirk, I mentally added another layer of armor to my heart. But while the bride was choosing linens, the compliance officer was following the money. I waited until Grant was in the shower on Thursday morning to log into our joint checking account. We had opened it 6 months ago to pay for wedding expenses. Grant put in the majority of the funds, which he constantly reminded me of, but I contributed 40% of my paycheck. I downloaded the transaction history for the last quarter and exported it to a spreadsheet. I filtered out the obvious vendors, the caterer, the florist, the venue. I was looking for the noise, the static, and there it was, every Tuesday, like clockwork. There was a transfer. It was never a large amount, $200, $350, $190, amounts small enough that they blended in with grocery runs or utility bills. But when I summed them up, the total for the last 3 months was nearly $4,000. The recipient was listed simply as Vantage Consulting Services. I ran a search on the business name. It led to a generic landing page with stock photos of handshakes and glass buildings, no address, no team page, just a contact form. I checked the state business registry. Vantage Consulting Services had been incorporated 4 months ago. The registered agent was a generic legal service in Delaware. It smelled like a shell. It smelled like siphoning. Grant was moving money out of our joint account, money that included my contributions, into a black box. I needed a professional. Nadia Pierce did not have a marble office. She worked out of a converted brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place you would miss if you were not looking for it. I had found her name on a forum for women navigating high-conflict divorces. They called her the surgeon. I took a half-day off work, claiming a migraine. I sat across from Nadia in her small, book-lined conference room. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair cut into a sharp bob and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human betrayal. I did not cry. I did not tell her how much I loved him or how much it hurt. I simply slid the folder across the desk. Inside was the transcript of the voice memo, the printout of Marissa's email about Project C, and the spreadsheet of the suspicious transfers. Nadia put on her reading glasses and read in silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner was the only sound in the room. It felt like a countdown. After 10 minutes, she took off her glasses and looked at me. "You are not here for a prenup review," she stated. It was not a question. "No," I said. "I want to know what they are doing." "They are setting up a distress scenario," Nadia said, her voice dry and clinical. "Based on this email and the transfers, my educated guess is that they intend to leverage you. This Vantage Consulting is likely a debt vehicle. They move money out, claim it is for services, and perhaps even generate invoices to create a paper trail of debt. After you are married, if you sign that power of attorney mentioned in the email, they can assign that debt to you personally while keeping the assets in trusts you cannot touch." She tapped the transcript with a manicured fingernail. "The sister," Nadia said. "Marissa, she is not just a participant. She is the architect. Grant is the face. She is the brain. He is too arrogant to come up with a structure this complex on his own. He likes the image of wealth. She likes the mechanics of control." A chill went down my spine. I had thought Marissa was just a greedy sibling, but Nadia was right. Marissa was the campaign manager. Grant was just the candidate she was trying to get elected to the office of my husband so they could loot the treasury. "What do I do?" I asked. "Do I leave him now?" Nadia shook her head slowly. "If you leave now, you lose. You get out, yes, but they keep your contributions to the joint account. They keep the deposits, and they learn from their mistakes with you so they can do it better to the next woman. But more importantly, if they are moving this aggressively, They might already have opened accounts in your name using your social security number if you ever left documents lying around. I thought about the nights Grant stayed up late in his office. I thought about my purse left unattended on the kitchen counter. If you want to be safe, Nadia continued, leaning forward, you need to know exactly how deep the hooks are. You cannot confront a liar until you have the map of his lies. If they are planning to trap you with legal documents after the honeymoon, you need to trap them with evidence of intent to defraud before the wedding. She slid the folder back to me. Go back, she said. Play the part. Feed them what they want. Make them think the trap is working. When a predator thinks the prey is asleep, that is when they get sloppy. We need one more piece of concrete evidence that links Marissa directly to the financial fraud. Then, we drop the hammer. I left her office with my heart rate steady, but my mind racing. I felt a strange sense of calm. The confusion was gone. I had a mission. I drove back to my apartment. I parked the car and checked my phone. Grant had texted me, thinking about dinner. Sushi? I stared at the screen. I could picture him typing it, probably sitting across from Marissa, laughing about how easy I was to manage. I decided to test the waters. I needed to see how eager they were. I needed to see if they would snap at the bait. I typed a reply, my fingers moving deliberately. Sushi sounds great. Also, I was thinking about what you said regarding our future. Maybe we should just look into merging all our separate savings accounts into the joint one right after the wedding. It seems silly to keep things separate if we are building a life together. I hit send. I sat in the car and watched the seconds tick by on the dashboard clock. 1, 2, 3, my phone buzzed. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Babe, I love that you are thinking big picture. Let's talk about it tonight. I can have Marissa draw up a draft for the bank so it is ready to go. I let out a short, humorless breath. He had replied in less than 30 seconds. He was so hungry for it. He thought he had won. Come and get it, I whispered to the screen. I put the car in gear and drove up the ramp. The bride was dead. The investigator was just clocking in. Grant came home that evening with a bottle of vintage Cabernet and a smile that didn't just reach his eyes. It practically devoured his face. The change in him was instantaneous and terrifying. For weeks, he had been distant, answering my questions about the guest list with heavy sighs and checking his watch whenever I spoke for more than 2 minutes. But tonight, after my text message about merging our finances, I was suddenly the center of his universe again. To us, he said, pouring the wine into our crystal glasses, to building a real empire together. He clinked his glass against mine. The sound rang out sharp and clear in the apartment. To us, I echoed, taking a sip. The wine was rich and expensive, but it tasted metallic on my tongue. I really admire you, Leah, he said, reaching across the island to squeeze my hand. His grip was firm, possessive. Most women get so defensive about money, but you understand that marriage is a partnership, total transparency. That is why I love you. You are practical. Practical. That was a new one. Before, I was beautiful, kind, or sweet. Now that I had offered up my financial jugular, I was practical. I just want to make things easy, I said, keeping my voice soft, looking down at the marble counter as if I were shy. If we are going to be husband and wife, we shouldn't have secrets. Exactly, he said, his eyes gleaming. Marissa was saying the same thing. Actually, she wants to take you out tomorrow, a little sister-in-law bonding time before the big day, my treat. I knew exactly what that meant. It wasn't a treat, it was a deposition. The spa was an ultra-modern sanctuary in Westlake. All white stone, bamboo, and silence that cost $300 an hour. Marissa and I were sitting in a private steam room, wrapped in plush white towels. The air was thick and hot, making it hard to breathe, which I suspected was exactly why Marissa had chosen it. It is harder to lie when you are gasping for air. Marissa looked impeccable even while sweating. She had her hair wrapped in a turban and was sipping cucumber water with the elegance of a viper. Grant tells me you two are finally getting the financial details sorted, she said, her voice echoing slightly off the tiled walls. "I am so relieved. He has worked so hard to build his portfolio. He needs a wife who supports that structure, not one who complicates it." "I want to support him," I said, wiping condensation from my forehead. "I know I don't have much compared to him, but I want to contribute." Marissa turned her head, her eyes locking onto mine through the steam. "Here it comes." "Oh, stop. You are too modest," she purred. "Grant mentioned something about a family inheritance coming through. I didn't know your father left anything significant. I thought, well, Grant said he was a teacher." She was fishing. She wanted to know the size of the catch before they reeled it in. "He was," I lied smoothly. "But his brother, my uncle, was in real estate in Florida. It is all very complicated. There is a trust that dissolves when I turn 32 or when I get married. Whichever comes first, honestly, I don't understand half the legal jargon. It gives me a headache." I saw a flicker of hunger in Marissa's eyes. She leaned in closer, invading my personal space. "Legal jargon can be tricky," she said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic coo. "But you have to be careful. Leah, lawyers will bleed you dry if you let them, since I handle so much of Grant's administrative work. I could take a look at those trust documents for you, just to make sure you aren't paying unnecessary fees. We could roll it into the family management structure." "That would be amazing," I said, widening my eyes. "I just want it handled. I hate paperwork." "Don't worry about a thing," she said, patting my damp knee. Her touch was cold despite the heat of the room. "We will have a notary ready after the wedding. Signatures are so much easier to obtain. We can just do a blanket authorization and you won't have to look at another document for years." Blanket authorization. She had just admitted it. They didn't want to help me manage money. They wanted the legal power to move it without asking me. She was talking about a durable power of attorney, disguised as a convenience. "You are the best sister I could ask for," I said. Marissa smiled, and it was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "We take care of our own. Leah." When I got home, I felt dirty. I took a long shower, scrubbing my skin until it turned pink, trying to wash off the feeling of Marissa's false sympathy. When I stepped out, wrapped in a robe, I found the apartment empty. Grant was at the gym. His iPad was sitting on the nightstand, charging. I knew his passcode. It was his birthday, 1014. Narcissists rarely choose codes that aren't about themselves. I unlocked the device. My heart hammered against my ribs.